Wow, has it really been 8 games already? It feels like yesterday since I started this marathon run of the Blue Bomber, yet I found myself really getting engrossed in the series so far, for better and for worse. And so today I'm going to be taking a look at Mega Man 8 on the PlayStation 3's Virtual Console. Though I was disappointed with how Mega Man 7 turned out, at least it set a new standard for the rest of the 16-bit games to follow. So will Mega Man 8 be better than its predecessor, or will it dive off the deep end? Well, that's what we're here to find out, so let's take a look. This is Mega Man 8. This is normally where I would talk about some of the behind-the-scenes details of the game, but honestly there's not a whole lot noteworthy. Even the designs of the Robot Masters came from, you guessed it, another design contest. The most interesting thing about Mega Man 8's presentation is that there's now full-fledged animated cutscenes, complete with a flowing narrative and voice acting. And it's awful. Just god-awful. I mean, seriously, the whole fucking thing. Look at it! The sound mixing is terrible, the voice acting is atrocious, Mega Man sounds like he took a hard knuckle to his robotic testicles, and Dr. Light sounds like he spent years being Elmer Fudd's drinking buddy.
Wabbit twanks. Kill the wabbit, kill the wabbit, kill the wabbit.
The story here centers around something called Evil Energy. As if the name wasn't dumb enough, it even looks like a skull. It's like the game thinks that the audience doesn't understand what the concept of evil is. The game kicks off with a battle in space, as a robot that appears to be completely made of this evil energy battles the robot Duel, whom was designed to destroy said evil energy. Both of them fall to Earth and are eventually discovered by Dr. Wily and Mega Man. Dr. Wily, predictably, wants to use the evil energy to take over the world, and Mega Man decides to help get Duel repaired before going off to slap Dr. Wily across the face once more. Like in the last game, we for whatever reason only have access to 4 Robot Masters. Afterward we get a brief intermission where we need to fight Duel, and then we can take on the rest of the Robot Masters, and then we can finally defeat Dr. Wily. Oh, excuse me, this is Mega Man 8, so I believe his name really is, Dr. Light. Some assistance please.
Dr. Wily.
There you go. Our first Robot Masters consist of Grenade Man, Frost Man, Tengu Man, and Cloud Man. Then we follow up with Astro Man, Aquaman, Sword Man, and finally Search Man. All these guys have voice acting as well, and it's just as bad as you think. And don't get me started on Aquaman.
I'm Aquaman, but you can call me handsome guy.
Why is he always talking in some kind of gay code?
I am not gay. They don't have a code.
How would you know that if you're not gay?
Unlike last time where Dr. Light and Mega Man discuss every weapon you get, here it's back to the old formula, so let's go over them. Grenade Man gives you the Flash Bomb. This is my most used weapon, as it's an overall effective weapon and can be used to take out groups of enemies with ease. Frost Man grants you the Ice Wave, which is great for taking down ground-based enemies. Tengu Man gives you the Tornado Hole. It fires a fan that creates a tornado, which is good for taking out enemies moving towards you. That and the tornado can be used to carry you upward for a short time. Clownman's Thunderclaw isn't as effective as a weapon, but it can be used to grapple onto these poles as though you were in the circus. The Astro Crush from Astro Man is this game's screen nuke. Like any screen nuke, it uses a ton of energy, so use it sparingly. Aquaman's Water Balloon is... moving on. Sword Man has the Flame Sword. It's a close-range weapon, but it has some pretty decent power. Lastly, Search Man probably has the most useful weapon, the Homing Missile. Use this to counter swarms of enemies rushing you or to take down enemies in hard-to-reach places. I wouldn't put it above the Flash Bomb though, because although the homing missiles can be spammed, not all of them may reach a target, plus they only hit once. In the beginning of the game during the intro stage, Mega Man also gets equipped with the Mega Ball. It has some decent power, but it's also pretty tricky to use when you first get it. Up next we have the upgrades. Like last time, we can buy a number of upgrades by finding and using bolts that are found in stages. The only problem is that you can no longer grind for them. They're now hidden in stages, and there's only 40. A lot of them can be a pain to go out of the way and get, but because some of these new upgrades are pretty handy if you're just using the Mega Buster, you should get some of these upgrades for when you eventually encounter Bass. Rush also gets a few different upgrades this time around, which you can get after you defeat the mini-bosses of the first 4 stages. Rush Bike lets Mega Man travel really fast, and can be used to get an out-of-reach bolt. Rush Item gives Mega Man a random item, or screw him over. Rush Bomb flies in and rains havoc on enemies, and Rush Health drops weapon energy and health all over the place for when you really need it. You may have noticed that I really didn't mention any of the returning items, specifically E-Tanks. Well, that's because there aren't any here. For whatever reason, E-Tanks, as well as most of the upgrades in the previous game, were completely removed here. This gets me into one of my biggest problems with the game, cutting out good content that works in favor of making the game harder. Kind of like how Fire Emblem Fate's Conquest storyline cuts out solid mechanics that were present in Birthright in order to make it more difficult. Cutting out content is not something that any game should do, but rather base the difficulty around the content available as well as what you have access to. It was a balance that Mega Man 6 was able to get, but why not here? Thankfully, despite the mechanics that were removed, Mega Man 8 does actually compensate. For one, there are now checkpoints in most of the stages, so if you lose all your lives, you don't go back to the beginning. If you happen to die, all your weapon energy will be refilled too. And most of the weapons are quite useful as well, allowing for some decent variety. There isn't a whole lot of bullshit moments either, except for a couple things. The first is the beginning of Swordman stage where you have to go through a gauntlet of trials and defeat a mini-boss before getting a checkpoint. And the second one is something that everyone that's played Mega Man 8 is familiar with. The goddamn snowboarding sections. Nothing will make you want to break your controller quite like these sections. There's 3 of them, 2 in Frostman stage and at the beginning of Wowie stage 1. The board you ride on will go insanely fast, and the commands you are given only allow for a split-second reaction to either jump or slide. Not to mention where you slide and where you jump also matters, as you can effortlessly undershoot your jump, or in the case of sliding, you'll often have a jump command right after sliding, and in many cases your button inputs will not be read, causing you to slide off to your death. The Frostman sections aren't that bad, and getting to them isn't very difficult, and they have checkpoints right after. And to be fair, the Wowie section is at the beginning, but the problem is that there's no alternate ways to help make these sections easier, so your progress will likely come to a screeching halt. Let's not forget that the Wowie section is about half the stage, and the section itself is a huge gauntlet, so unless you can reach the boss room, if you die, you are set all the way back to the start because the Wowie stages don't have checkpoints. And yet, even after all this, the Robot Masters as well as the Wowie bosses aren't that bad. The challenge is just about right for a Mega Man game, barring the bullshit of the snowboarding. Even Dr. Wowie isn't that bad. Sure, you may need to call in rush health, but the only real challenging part is the second phase, and that's only because of the lack of E-tanks. The other thing that can be considered the downside for Mega Man 8 is that it's vastly unoriginal to the previous 7 titles. This was a big problem with critics, and though I'm in their camp in that regard, I'm also closely looking at the small tweaks in the series that can alter the way the game is played, not just the overall concept as a platformer. Aside from that, I did rather enjoy watching the cutscenes. They're awful, yes, but the kind of awful that you just can't help but laugh at. Like the Westboro Baptist Church claiming they're Christians. It's just so ridiculous that I can't take it seriously. Aside from the unoriginality, the greatest crime that Mega Man 8 has really committed was the removal of the solid mechanics present in the previous games. That and not having a competent playtester for the goddamn snowboarding sections. And let's not forget that the checkpoints and an actual save feature still allows an easy learning curve for new players. Not exactly a shining diamond, but also not a steaming pile of shit. Mega Man 8 is a little above average and is worth looking at if you're curious. Just remember to give yourself plenty of patience and then some for the snowboarding sections, as you will die. A lot. So that ends this review. For those of you that are waiting on a Mega Man and Bass review, well, you might need to wait a little bit. You see, I'm very aware of this game's reputation, and I know for a fact that I'm going to need some help going into it. So the upload date on the next review is going to be largely dependent on the guest schedule. But who is this guest, you may ask? Well, you're going to need to stay tuned and find out. But until then, I'll see you in the next review. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Regnilla, wishing you to have fun, and to take care.